So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At last we start with this wonderful tribute and publication to the great Joshua Compston, produced by publisher and gallerist Adam Baldwin, and masterminded, edited and conceived after many other tributes to Joshua by Darren Coffield, who's an expert on all sorts of related things, including all sorts of kinky events at the Colony Club, but Joshua's exploits were those of a much younger generation. So what we're going to do tonight is Adam's going to speak a little bit first, and then I think it's going to be Darren, then I'm going to come in with a bit of Courtauld history, and then we're going to have what has been described to me as a fireside chat. We don't know how this is going to go, but we do know that there are many people who knew Joshua in the audience, and a little bit later on, I would love it very much if some of you could pop up and give us the odd anecdote or experience. This won't be like an academic event with people trying to challenge the speaker with the latest bit of whatever. So it's not going to be like an academic to and fro, but it would be such a pity when so many of you made the effort who knew Joshua, as so many of us did here, to not have your own, witnesses and funny reminiscences, because he was such a life-giving and amusing person. I think he was like Queen Victoria. He would understand what the word amusing can mean in all its manifestations. So the first person who is going to amuse us, and to whom we have to thank for the occasion and the book, is Adam. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. So we at the gallery we typically focus on kind of 20th century contemporary. We came across Joshua through almost by chance, just through his sort of position in the art world and in the sort of art historical context, and we sort of just fell in love with the story and the whole enigma, if I can say that, to someone like myself sort of coming into this. So we have no connection with Joshua other than the fact that we sort of read his story, and the more I read about him, the more I realised I wanted to do something about it. So because of that, we started publishing the book, and then midway through, we got in touch with Darren, and then obviously Darren is the sort of one sort of known authority on Joshua, and then Darren, and that sort of started a sort of a domino effect, so to speak, and then we met Sarah, and then the whole thing sort of snowballed from there. And that was a year ago, maybe a bit longer, I think.
Just about a year ago.
Yeah, and and it's been a real sort of labour of love. We've done the book. It's been a real kind of collective effort, really, I think. And here we are. It's been great to do it. And thank you to sort of Darren for being here, and for Sarah for making it happen here as well. So I think that's kind of
lovely. Come and sit down and join the round table. So we've got a most beautiful and lovely slideshow, for which I also have to thank Darren, of Joshua in his many manifestations, not so much at the Courtauld, more in his exciting art world. One thing I'd like to say just at the beginning while you're looking at these, and I think it's just going to turn, isn't it, is that when I went to the Courtauld exhibition of masterpieces sent to the Fondation Louis Vuitton, where our development department had done their big chronology, I was absolutely amazed, because there was a certain moment, and there was a whole page, and the most beautiful image of Joshua sitting up, in the middle of the first East Wing collection hang, with a whole great big entry about him as a key moment in Courtauld history that was viewed, of course, by the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who went to the Fondation Louis Vuitton, who weren't our London fan club. But I think we need to get to the beginnings of that London fan club. So Darren, over to you. And we put our things on this.
Yes. Going back to the beginning, I first met Joshua at the Campbell School of Art on the first day of the art school, and he didn't know what to expect from an art school. I mean, I came from a council estate, and people like me weren't really supposed to go to art schools or both. So this amazing guy who refused to sit with anyone else sitting on the steps wearing his grandmother's fur coat and reading the copy of Ulysses. And this is obviously a code, because at that time, if you wore a fur coat, everyone's anti-fur. which will explain later why Shoreditch became so big, because actually Shoreditch was full of furriers who made fur coats, and that's why the warehouses were empty. They moved into, later on in Shoreditch, they were run by Jewish furriers who couldn't sell jackets anymore. So it's when we knew this, and this obviously is a code. I mean, you could dress as a punk, you could dress anything you want. That's a very easy code to wear, but to dress like that actually meant you had a kind of intellectual kind of drive to you, a kind of edge. So also I realised at that time, dealing with Joshua, that he was making sculptures from skeletons and also from dead parts of animals. I mean, in his bedroom he had a thorax of a goose that he stretched down in the shape of Jesus in formaldehyde. This is sort of 5 or 6 years before Damien Hirst really came on the scene. And then he didn't really know what he wanted to do. I mean, he was obsessed by George Orwell. He kind of thought that there must be some sort of process to everything. Something must have some kind of end game, some sort of financial purpose, political or otherwise. So he decided to go to El Salvador, which was the murder capital of the world. He'd been told that if he could get into the Courtauld, he had to study Spanish. And so his excuse not to go to the Courtauld and try and kill himself was to actually learn Spanish in El Salvador. And of course, El Salvador at that time was completely bonkers. There's a film by Oliver Stone. If you watch this film, it pretty much sums up what it was like then, when people had been literally pulled out of cars and shot through the back of the head, coming out journalists and people. And the first day Joshua arrived, he was told immediately by the British consulate to leave. But my final memory of Joshua was being at a bar, which was a pub called the Intrepid Fox, which now disappears, a burger joint on Wardour Street, which is where all the punks movement sort of used to hang out and stuff. And Joshua looked something like the equivalent of Quentin Crisp mixed with Indiana Jones. And he had a Livingstone badge, and he sort of sauntered off down the street, and I thought, that'd be the last time I ever heard of him. But anyway, he spent 80 days and 80 nights in Central America, and despite his best attempts of trying to join all the fights, with helicopter gunships going overhead and chasing the war kind of outrun him. So as he says in his diaries, I couldn't die in a blaze of glory, so I decided to go to the Courtauld. So once he came to the Courtauld, he found a very different world than he expected, but maybe you're better to say what the Courtauld was like when Joshua turned up, before we had the West Wing collection.
Of course, well, we just moved from Portman Square into Somerset House. And the point was that the walls were very bare, and this didn't please Joshua at all. And also, of course, he saw it as an opportunity. And at that time, what he did was go straight to the Duchess of Westminster, I believe, and managed to get the most astounding loans from people in Bond Street, and to get things like Gilbert and George's postcard pieces for the first showing. But there was also things like his favourite abstract artist, who was his friend David Taborn, but also people who were achieving great prominence, like Langlands and Bell, who came. And this, and I had to, I was his tutor, and I was the most sympathetic to him, and I thought he was rather extraordinary. And he was a very naughty boy, of course. He wouldn't type his essays properly. This was just when everybody was turning into a world where students had to type. His were always handwritten, as mine had been indeed, but it wasn't like, that was another era. His were always covered in ink, with ink all over his fingers, which is also something that I used to have as well, as a problem. So I was particularly sympathetic, and our director at the time was called Michael Kaufman. And we had to go and propose this to Michael Kaufman. But of course, the question, as you can imagine, was one of security. And Joshua, as I remember, because I've just been rereading my first obituary of him, he used to particularly irritate some members of staff. And I don't know why I've singled out there the medievalists, but there must have been some reason why he particularly irritated medievalists. Although Michael Kaufman, our director, was a medievalist. But basically, Michael Kaufman was a very benign person who actually had some curious tastes inherited from his own father, who'd been a picture dealer in Germany. And the point was that the Courtauld had to agree to put, financially speaking, to put locks on all the seminar room doors so that they automatically locked, to keep very expensive works safe. And second time round, though, we said, look, this concept of patronage, while it has worked fantastically, And I mean, the high points for me, even in teaching, not going to the opening, were that projecting Picabier's spot paintings of 1922 onto a screen with Damien Hirst's spot paintings on either side of the screen. You can imagine. It was very exhilarating, and of course it's inconceivable now. But through the patronage and understanding of our director, Michael Kaufman, we were able to do this, security situation on all the things, and actually have that. The second time round, though, he said, look, this model's got to change. And, Josh, you've done this fabulous thing. It was called the Courtauld Loan Collection. I can't remember at what stage it was called the East Wing Collection, because it was to do with the teaching wing and not the galleries wing, which was the so-called West Wing. It's got to be student-led. And because I'd been involved, I became the kind of go-between. But the idea was that students who were interested would take on all the various roles, because it's not just I like so-and-so. There's the meeting and visiting artists, convincing them that this isn't dangerous, that their works are going to be respected and loved, that it's going to be a great hang. They're the people who organise the openings. I was just telling you in the lift, we used to have floods of vodka in vodka days. And there was beer and everything else. There were the people who actually were getting professional training in terms of what they might wish to do in the, I was going to say in the next world, in the next world when they went into the quote-unquote real world. But that professional training and that idea of the East Wing collection as Joshua's heritage is something that you have today. And when I thought, how am I going to begin this? I thought I would do what I've only done once before, which was for Richard Rogers, which was to quote the words inside the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral that say, si monumentum requiris circumspice, which means if you want to see his monument, look around you, because you all came in to our beautifully refurbished reception, thanks to our new director, Mark Hallett, who sends you all his very best wishes, can't be with us, and who's put Nicola Cole's magnificent triptych above the reception. But I took both of you just round the corner here, where there are more Joshua works in the far corner, little bits, his book cover image, a Gilbert and George image, other men's flowers, the top floor, and also their quotations all over the place. So the first time that the so-called East Wing collection was revamped for Vernon Square after a rather dour period plus the COVID period, we called it VS1, like Vernon Square 1. We're looking forward to Vernon Square 2, but I hope that some of Joshua's legacy like that is going to remain with us. I did want to say one or two more things about Joshua as a student, but I think I'm going to possibly go back to you now.
Yeah.
Or...
So going back to the original concept of the original hanging contemporary art, the Courtauld, at that time there's no curation courses. You couldn't learn to become a curator. Basically, Joshua was writing the rule book here. There was people like Bernard Jacobson, who sold contemporary art, who wrote to the Courtauld, who got wind of it and just said to them they shouldn't put this on. There's a huge amount of drag from Nicholas Sirota trying to stop it. But Joshua, when he was growing up, he knew people like Peter Blake. So, for example, when he was a child, he found a toy shop that basically it closed down, and Joshua kept all the toys, all the advertising things together, and as a young kid turned up at Peter Blake's doorstep and offered them to Peter Blake. So later on in life, this sort of paid off for Joshua. Then Joshua one day, he kept asking people, will they help, and no one would help. So I remember sitting around his on his mother's kitchen table, and he had the 500 rich list. Every January, the Sunday Times would publish this magazine, the 500 rich list. So he wrote to 500 people. And the only two people who responded were Jeremy Fry and the Duchess of Westminster. And the original concept of it was that everything they bought would sell on for a capital gain. So as opposed to every other show after Joshua, the original artworks did actually make a lot of money. So for example, the Damien Hirst spot painting, no one wanted to buy it because they thought it was just crap. They just thought it was a load of smiles. They thought, who's going to buy this fucking shit? So he eventually persuaded a woman who was Anne Grob to buy it for £1,500. That's probably worth now about 4.5 million. It's over 2 meters long. So he had to fiddle stuff at the end because there wasn't a real backers to do it. But Joshua knew these things had to be in the Courtauld at that time. It was very, very clear what he did in certain ways because I'm just trying to put my notes here. What was very interesting at that time is, so Jeremy Fry got involved. So Jeremy Fry, who's kind of forgotten now, but Jeremy Fry came from the Fry's chocolate family, but he didn't make any money from chocolate. Jeremy Fry was an engineer. He made all his money off of doing a nodding donkey, which you do in oil. And he invented a valve that could take more oil out per minute per second than anything else. It was a nodding donkey. So Jeremy invited us up for the weekend. It's like with Nell and I. So Joshua was the posh one, he's the neurotic one, and I was the working class one, and Jeremy was Uncle Monty. And it was pretty hellish. But anyway, so Jeremy actually lived in this house. It was a bit like, look at, if you go into IKEA, it's literally tableaus of front rooms in a huge empty distillery. Very American things. He came from America, made his money there. So you had like rooms of Charles Eames, rooms of Alvarado, just one after the other, but all in a wider context. Kenneth Nolan's on the wall, his best friends with Hockley. So it was a very exciting world to be in. And then from there, Jeremy was going to back Joshua to run Factual Nonsense. So the whole thing of Joshua leaving art school and becoming this sort of golden boy was predetermined, but Joshua was going out with Maureen Paley then. Jeremy was backing him. He got the right space with Jeremy Cooper. And that, suddenly I think wrong because Jeremy Fry, as we always was told, he's a very bad man to do it. Everyone said people do commit suicide over him. He pulled the money out at the last minute, so then Joshua was stuck in Factual Nonsense with no cash. And that's where the whole idea of all these fakes and things come from. They basically come from adversity. So you had to put people on the street, create ideas, make things happen because there was no money behind the gallery.
That's amazing. And I know that I was a very busy little bee, and I lived in the West End. I've now lived in the East End for over 20 years, following, you could say, in Joshua's footsteps, but far too late in the day. And when he invited me to hanging picnic, I thought, well, there are going to be hundreds more hanging picnics. I'm really too busy. I've really got to finish my text. And can you believe it? As a great Joshua lover, I missed hanging picnic because I thought it was one of so many other things that would happen.
Well, the hanging picnic was a great conceit because basically the South Bank show, which was Melvin Bragg then, there's only one TV programme in the world, that was Melvin Bragg, the South Bank, decided to make programmes on young entrepreneurs in the arts. And it was meant to be shown on Saturday, kind of midday, sort of after Swap Shop or these kind of things. And they chose Joshua, but Joshua had no money then, so they had to invent an event to happen. So he basically reinvented the Bayswater Road on Hoxton Square. And what's interesting...
Sorry, are you saying for a television programme which happened, which I didn't know about?
Yeah. So that was shown on ITV, that was South Bank show. But the thing was, it had to be done for that reason. So he basically conspired the whole thing, even at the end, lack of money and adversity to do that.
But that reminds us of everything one has taught him about the beginnings of Tristan Tzara, who left Romania on foot or whatever. So the interesting thing is that Joshua comes to everything from two ends, like the absolute top end with Jeremy Fry and these installations and so forth. But also, chronologically speaking, what's interesting is that in the past, people always said, you know, the Courtauld academe versus the exciting world of real contemporary art outside. First of all, we were all doing very exciting things. The people in later, not only just people in the later parts of, you know, centuries. I was working with the Pompidou Centre, which was sometimes very streets ahead of Tate at the time, whatever. The other thing was that Joshua actually learned not only about art from 1900 onwards, he learned about manifestos. He learned about people inventing funny things in adversity. He learned about the futurists, particularly the futurists and their manifestos, the Dadaists and the intersection of art with cabaret, the importance of, you know, engaged audiences who actually made things or did things. These all came out of his actually imaginatively appreciating what he was taught. And that for me was the greatest thing, because it wasn't just he had his academic life and his real life outside. It was he imaginatively understood what he was learning about and invested in it. And only yesterday, it's very funny because I invited a student an ex-student who would very much have liked to come. And she said, oh, I remember reading this amazing obituary of him so well. And it was in Hyperallergic, the trendiest American magazine that's just started up. I don't know when this was. Well, I think it was actually to do with the 2014 revival of A Fate Worse Than Death. But the epigraph I'd never seen before, and it says, "This age needs a brave and fun hero of modern art, such as Apollinaire. I will try to fulfill such role." So it's hilarious to me to think of teaching Joshua about cubism and Apollinaire writing Les Peintres Cubistes, and even inventing his sunshine-like name. Joshua didn't need to invent a pseudonym, but saying, yes, well, I'm going to be the next Apollinaire. I mean, most people who learn it don't think, well, I'm going to be the next Marcel Duchamp, or I'm going to be the next Guillaume Apollinaire. And he had this almost, well, if you use the word angelic, it is very appropriate in all sorts of many ways, but this idea that there were no obstacles to becoming the next Apollinaire, which in fact there weren't. The obstacles in the end were indeed some brute cash flow obstacles, which actually, of course, I never really knew about. But I really wanted to say that, well, two things. One thing about his real understanding of the impetus of people who were almost the same age as he was, for heaven's sake. You know, the difference between Tristan Zara, aged 22, and Joshua, aged 18 or something, is just 1 or 2 years. But the other thing was that when I went to Joshua's birthday party in Chiswick, and I always remember leaving with the moon shining in the Thames. The thing, I mentioned it in my first obituary, but I found it so wonderful because somebody gave him a first edition of Alfred Barr's Cubism and Abstract Art of 1936. And I was just near him and I saw his face light up because he really understood about books and documents and first editions and how precious these things were. Whereas if there are any of my students here, they know I have an aversion to what I call PDF world. When the Courtauld now is run in vast numbers by giving people PDFs of never mind what edition, and that idea of understanding, and even understanding how Barr conceived the whole thing in the first place and made it happen.
It's about going back to the source, isn't it? I mean, I write books now, I've interviews, so, for example, I spent 2 years trying to get hold of a lady in Switzerland, Anne Dunn, who was with Sonia Orwell the night that George Orwell died. Gosh. She was with Lucian Freud. It took 2 years, but so when you get there, eventually you get them, but then you got their story, and that's what I kind of learned from Joshua. One of his favourite books was called Modern Theory by H. Chip. And the whole book was just everybody who actually wrote it. They're just in the book. No one else is saying anything else.
Yeah.
Just straight from those people who were there.
By H.B. Chip. It was our Bible. Yeah. But that's sort of that's kind of the other end. That's slightly cheating to get them all the theories in one book. Yeah. It's
but going back to the idea of reviving Shoreditch or doing something in Shoreditch, I mean, it was a very strange place. I mean, I lived by the British Museum then, and you could walk to the end of Old Street. And when you got to the Old Street roundabout, it was literally like you'd gone to the back end of hell. There was no cash point. You couldn't buy a pint of milk on a Saturday, everything was shut. If you didn't have any cash on you in the pub, that's it, it's over. No one had any credit cards. And he was sort of in this place, occupying it. And he met this great guy called James Goff, who people don't really talk about enough. So James Goff had become sort of the first estate agent in the area, because James went there once to sell off a department store and he fell in love with it. And he got on very well with Joshua, and he backed all of Joshua's shows. And he got this kind of thing later on with the YBAs, and they complain about property developers being bought out there, but the YBAs have all gone on to make millions. Joshua never did, and nor did James, but James backed him all the way through. And it's just very, very funny what they got to. So James basically backed both of the Fates Worse Than Death. And the second Fate Worse Than Death got so big in the sense that 4,000...
What date was the second? The first was 93?
93, the second one was 94. But the fourth one, 4,000 people came. And they basically came from Notting Hill and Portobello. And then they realised they could buy the equivalent of a one-bedroom flat in Portobello. They could buy a warehouse in Shoreditch. And that's when it really kicked off.
Except, stupidly enough, living very near the Portobello Road, I didn't do that.
No, not me neither.
Yes, we were very silly.
It was a fundamental shift, not only in property but also in culture.
But we must say that people like Gilbert and George had moved into Fournier Street in their very eccentric way, which is right by Christchurch, Spitalfields. Courtauld people, you should know that Samuel and Louisa Courtauld are buried in the great Christchurch, Spitalfields, designed by Nicholas Hawksmoor, and with Gilbert and George living, just along the road in Fournier Street. It's the old Huguenot quarter, and that is indeed where, in the end, the great processions related to Joshua's tragic funeral took place. But it was a very amazing, very beautifully painted and beautifully organised, fantastically celebratory event in some ways. But it's very strange that there is that extra connection to the Courtauld and the Courtauld's church there. And I was just saying, when you were talking about the East End, of course, that Gilbert and George had their own market cafe there where they ate every meal, and
that's where Joshua met them. They were actually there washing up the dishes
in the market cafe.
Life used to be that accessible. I could walk in the Collins, meet Francis Bacon. You could go to the market cafe and Gilbert and George have marigold gloves on doing the dishes.
Yes.
Nowadays, where's Tracy Emin? Where's Damien Hirst? I mean, you don't meet people like that anymore, do you?
No, but there was a phase in the later 80s when, people like Tracy Emin, then they bought very, very, very big houses in that very posh that tiny little Spitalfields.
But they bought them on Fournier Street, and Gilbert and George said, how original.
Exactly. But then, of course, you're right, that the whole birth of Hoxton, excuse me, the move of White Cube to Hoxton, which is now, of course, moved out of Hoxton back to Bermondsey. There was a phase, and we all used to go for dinner in that beautiful Greek Orthodox church that had turned into a restaurant. It was a huge moment.
It was a very rough area, so to give you an idea of a typical afternoon, someone like James Goff dealing with Joshua, one day James had to hire a lady to replace his secretary, like a temp. So the poor lady's sitting there wondering what she's doing in Shoreditch. Then a man turns up with a plumber's bag and just stands there and says, I've got to see him. She goes, well, I think he's busy. And he goes, I'm going to see him anyway. Opens the plumber's bag, pulls out a sawn-off shotgun about the deal. And this is it was like the Wild West. And the furriers who used to run the area, they were very, very kind. If it wasn't for these Jewish gentlemen who were the furriers, who were considered the worst of the worst, they dealt with animal pelts, they were very kind to the eyes, because they'd come over during the pogroms in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and they were very, very kind to the eyes. They were happy to give them the buildings at a good price. And they really helped to kick off the area. And there's that kind of thing of immigration upon immigration, people helping each other.
Yeah, by the time I got to the East End, I don't think it was so dangerous, but it was incredibly interesting. And it was before Rodinsky's Room, for example, had been written, and that interpenetration of the Muslim culture and the history of the corn exchange was the Georgian corn exchange. Then I think it was a Quaker meeting house. Then I think it was a mosque. It's still a mosque. But everything had been through various iterations. There was, of course, Princelet Street with that fantastic old synagogue frozen in time. But there were artists like Stuart Brisley, who became a friend of mine, and his wife, Maya Brisley. And they were typical of having one of those tall, thin houses. And at the bottom, not the bottom of the garden, that sounds very suburban to say that, right up against the back door practically, was the secret and retained synagogue from the Jewish period. And then Stuart would have his studio on the ground floor, and they put in a glass floor, and his wife Maya was on the top where the women had originally been. So it's a really interesting and exciting area. Now it's become too touristy, and it's degenerated from its real high point, I think, was in the 90s.
You can never win, can you? I'm sure when Stuart moved in, the people who lived there for years said it's got too arty now.
Of course, no, you can't win at all.
But Joshua kind of knew the whole area, so he used to go around everything and clock all the buildings. And he'd go up to James Goff and say, we need a private drinking club here. And they said, no, you don't. Well, there is one now. See, we've got a swimming pool on the roof. The building he was looking at ended up becoming Rachel Whiteread's studio. It was an ex-synagogue. So Joshua would go around here, but no one would ever back him up. He had all the ideas. And you've got to remember, at that time, credit was very, very hard. When I was talking to Charles Booth Clibborn, who editions all of Damien Hirst's work, and were very clever, very good man, he did try to put money into Joshua, but Joshua, when he was going to China, for example, to go and see Gilbert George, he'd just lose the flight tickets.
Oh,
Which
he
does
didn't
become
want to do that, did
which
he?
does become very expensive in the days you can't rebook them online.
So what
When you actually
happened to
physically
him?
have to do that. But he bought him another set of airliner tickets at the last minute.
So he
It does
did go
become
to China.
expensive.
I'm so envious. you
Yes,
see.
no, he did go to China.
I was
yeah.
around reading the newspapers and the art press, but I had got no idea that he'd actually got sponsorship to go to China to see Gilbert and
That was
George.
Charles Booth Cliven paid
I'm
for that,
jolly envious, actually. I had to catch up going to China, but it wasn't like that great event, which I think James Burke has now written a great big book about.
It's coming out next year, another book, yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah. Amazing. So perhaps it's a moment, do any of you, in terms of the areas we've been talking about, have any specific contributions you'd like to make? Because these would be so exciting. Then we'll think of something else to talk about as well. Oh, go on, somebody. And because Emily, I understood from somebody said to me just now that you went to every single event I missed, every single Joshua thing. Perhaps, could we pass, oh yeah, we could pass this to you. This is Joshua's sister, Emily.
Yeah, I did go to every event. Actually, I've got one memory from the first Courtauld loan collection. And just to say that Josh, as a brother, was a complete pain in the arse. But he was also a fantastically exciting person to be around, and he really was a visionary. And I've got a memory of the very first event, and it was at the end, and you know, it had been this fantastic, incredible achievement. There was art on the walls, and there was a real buzz in the air.
On many walls, over many floors.
Yeah. And there was
much
lots of
bigger.
free booze, I think. There was
Lots of free
sponsorship by, was it Absolute Vodka?
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
And there was also the Beck's beer
Yes,
backstage
indeed.
on the sponsorship. And yes, there was lots of free booze. And then I remember there was canapes, which I think Mum had to transport in your car. But I remember Josh and me standing with black bin bags trying to clear up after the event, with Josh virtually weeping because he said, I'm broke. And he said, and look what they've done to the canapes, they're peasants, they're all peasants. And he swore that he would never do it again.
Do you mean not eating them properly or leaving little bits?
I think he just thought that they were possibly too beautiful to eat. And that they should have also been part of the artwork.
But also the Courtauld didn't pay for anyone to clean up afterwards.
No, so
and that was
Josh
the deal,
and I,
was to kind of break it, was that if you didn't clean the whole thing up afterwards, we were all left with bin bags.
that's
We're
right.
the artists, and we should be treated like royalty, and we were with bin bags, shoving stuff in bin bags, cleaning it up at the end.
Yeah.
But
That's
it
what
was a fabulous, fabulous beginning. And I think its aspiration to fill all the teaching spaces with really exciting work, its aspiration was what was so important, because it set a standard for all the next ones. And I must say, we've had one or two up and downs. We had one bad boy, shall I say, who tried to make David Bowie contribute, and it didn't work. I mean, we've had one or two blips, but generally we've had amazing installations. And I would like to single out, just because her name comes to my lips, Sarah Cochran, who went off to be a curator, Picabia expert curator in Arizona. I mean, she extended it actually into what we had at the time, a staff room space. There were one or two absolutely memorable things, and also one always learnt about artists one didn't know about.
True, but...
And also to extend it to photography. One thing that's very funny, I'd just like to say, is that at the beginning, most of the art was abstract, because the idea was that students in seminars would not be distracted from looking at altarpieces or portraits or whatever with abstract art. But funnily enough, that collapsed very quickly. So we not only had non-abstract art, but we had all sorts of rather naughty things by Genesis P. Orridge and all sorts of distracting things as well on the walls. But we seem to have survived. You were going to say something.
No, just say, to put it back in its context, you remember that time Anthony Blunt was a complete no-no. And it's very interesting, in my studio now I've still got Anthony Blunt's shelves that are from the Courtauld, which were thrown out when they moved to Somerset House.
His own bookshelves.
They're the pigeonholes, they're made of oak. And how they got thrown away, I don't know, and how Joshua got them the tube, I don't know. But they took them to my studio, it took 3 men to carry them up the staircase.
Marvellous.
Somehow he got them on the district line. So
Marvellous.
there's this whole sort of anti-Blunt thing, anti-this, anti-whatever, anti-hanging, blah, 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 get the rest of it. And Joshua was kind of bringing it back through contemporary art. He wanted people to go through the teachings of Blunt did, sit with the art, observe the art. There was a real disconnect with that then. It was like, they were literally like, just throw it all in the bin, get rid of it.
Well, I'm afraid to say that that attitude is more to do with workmen than staff being involved in any of those decisions. And of course, Anthony Blunt, our director, who was revealed as a Soviet spy, was no longer there. But he was a mythical figure. But it was also this idea of connoisseurship. And I think as well, in our new sort of expanded environment, shall we say, the idea of connoisseurship is something that has to be reintroduced now and then slowly, including, as I said, connoisseurship of books. But Joshua was a great connoisseur, and one of the things I think you may have been able to see, we haven't been able to see this, but he was a great advocate of tweed suits and looking very Edwardian at a time. And he could also look, you know, in beautiful white suits, as you must have seen as well. But he had also this Edwardian dimension that went with the connoisseur image, and that was very important.
Because
even when you were talking about oak pigeonholes.
But at that time, connoisseurship was out the window, and it is now. But
not quite.
Going back,
it's more difficult now.
But going back to Blunt, I mean, Blunt was a double agent. He actually worked for the British royal family, and he was only exposed by Margaret Thatcher at the end because it suited him. So he actually wasn't a Soviet spy. He actually worked for the British government. So, sorry.
We can talk about that over, unfortunately, not any strong vodka.
No.
But anyway, we are a place full of tales, and of course, because there isn't unbelievably enough a book about the Courtauld, many students don't ever know any of this mythology. It's very funny to me not only to think that Joshua was born in 1970 and some of our students are born after the year 2000, so it seems like, you know, absolutely ancient. But all these stories, we had an event with Anthony Blunt, and the blurb for the research form didn't say former director of the Courtauld Institute revealed as, and people thought he was a guy called Anthony Blunt.
But the only way I'd equate Joshua to Anthony Blunt is that so many museum directors were taught by Blunt that they went all throughout the world. And they weren't taught to become spies, whatever. They were just taught academic genius, and they became academic genius throughout the world and run institutions. Same with Joshua. Every day, the only person, and I've buried lots of people, I judge myself by Joshua because his critique was something you'd always want to live up to. Always very fine. The best.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is this interesting thing to talk about, though, that went with his Edwardian persona of trying to annoy and irritate people, including with the logo FN.
Oh no, that's because that was the National Front then. So you have to remember that Hoxton Square, if you was a member of the fascist party, you could only be in Hoxton Square. That's how they contained them. Margaret Thatcher stopped neo-Nazis marching through England. So they used to contain them in Hoxton Square, and they used to have riot police down horseback. Then when Joshua was doing events around Hoxton Square, he'd turn it back to front. You'd see NF, National Front, it became Factual Nonsense. And he'd get attacked for that. But Gilbert and George could get away with it, Joshua couldn't. There was a kind of play with sort of like fashion, because everyone was so left-wing at art school. I remember coming back one day, my hair was completely white, and one of my tutors said, "My God, what's happened to you?" I said, "I've just modelled for Gilbert and George." And they'd spray your hair white with spray paint.
Really?
And I just got a lecture for an hour and a half about them being fascists. I didn't care, just paid me 20 quid. I needed the money. I just wanted to get the...
Very
they also didn't give me the money to take the white paint out of my hair. It took days.
Oh, that was jolly mean of them.
It cost more in shampoo and it didn't get paid.
Cable Street, a little bit further down, was the place of the fascist riots in 1934. Yeah. And so there were these sort of... there were these interesting tensions around the whole thing as well. And yet, you know, it was at the Basquiat exhibition the day Joshua died that I expected to see him, because on the one hand there was history dragging us back into the past, or the history of the Courtaulds in Christchurch, Spitalfield, or whatever. On the other side, I think one mustn't underestimate how very, very vibrant the scene was at the time. I read in the book about there being only 10 galleries, 10 contemporary galleries around at the time. I don't know that that's 100% true. I mean, obviously, as you all know, Tate Modern opened in 2000, in the year 2000. The Tate in the 1960s had been the absolute cradle of pop art, along with the Hayward and the Whitechapel and everything had been very vibrant. There was a moment when things became more boring, but with the kind of Tony Blair era, in all the obituaries of Prescott, you're suddenly seeing how young Tony Blair looks at the moment. That era, with the YBAs being invited to 10 Downing Street and things, I mean, all the cusp of that era, if you want to be a little bit before, art was extremely exciting. And in all the people who were doing my own, we loved the 1970s because so much was happening when there was the economic crisis in London and things were dark and gloomy. But this is when the most incredible American artists were here, when the most extraordinary conceptual art projects were here, when the most extraordinary protests were happening in Trafalgar Square. And so just after that, you know, the 80s, with, of course, Norman Rosenthal, who did Sensation, always producing great shows at the Royal Academy. There was a moment that was more boring and more turgid, but then the beginning of the, I mean, I didn't remember that Freeze was as early as 1988, and Sensation, was that 89? I don't know. But anyway, whatever it was really, it was beginning to be really exciting.
Sensation was the year after Joshua died, so literally Joshua's death was the marker, as Charles Booth Clifford said to me. It's very hard to get credit anyway. If it only lasted for one more year, Joshua, all the money would have come through. Suddenly all the floodgates opened.
Yes, well, I always think of him together with Jay Joplin, who was from a very privileged background, really, and how...
Well, Jay was selling fire extinguishers at the time.
Well, there you are, because you know all these amazing backstories. But now if you think of the prominence of Jay Joplin, you know, Joshua could have so easily become the equivalent of...
It's a very small world. That's what happened at the end. That's why Joshua sort of gave up the ghost, because basically he'd been cut out. There had been decisions made, as there always are decisions. That was a very small club, that he wasn't going to be part of anything. And he understood that that was the way it was going to happen.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, because you know all these backstories that I don't really know. I can kind of...
I do know that very much so was Jay Joplin.
Mike. Sorry.
Mike, please. I mean, I know from living with Josh and throwing the parties and so on that Jay Joplin certainly came, and Josh was very disappointed that he had the money to be an agent and for the exact same people that Josh wanted to be, and was able to do it more than he could. And I think Joe Joplin was slightly older than him, but you know, he saw talent in the same people and just, I mean, obviously I gave him money, but I'm not a wealthy woman, so I'd have been able to give him a few fried egg breakfasts in the local cafe.
But whatever happens, I mean, these other people we're talking about are not Apollinaires, and they don't have this kind of tribute or this aura that Joshua has, which I think is so...
But we have to remember that Jay Joplin's father was the Minister of Agriculture at the time, so he was actually in the cabinet under Margaret Thatcher, so these people had a lot of weight. And he very amazingly resigned, I think a month before they proved that Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease worked, mad cow disease. So
oh dear, I didn't know
that was a pretty good move.
So do we have any other people in the audience who knew Joshua who would like to just come in with one or two memories? I'm going to read out my little piece in here, my new piece, shortly, but are there any more people here? Oh, well, maybe we'll have some more in the end. So I'm going to read out now a little tiny piece I wrote for the book which reprints my initial obituary of 1996, which says all sorts of things, some of which I've recapitulated. There is one lesson in me, for me though, in rereading what I originally wrote, and that is I keep thinking now, especially, that I've got to write my memoirs, and what's so dreadful for me is there are details in this, very picturesque details, which I wrote at the time, and I realise I've forgotten them, and that means that I'm going to forget, I must have forgotten as well, so many other picturesque details. So it's a great lesson to one that one's got to really write on the hop. I'm using my little torch here because it's the light's not very good. So this is what I wrote at the beginning of the year, because remember Joshua was reacting to horrible bare walls. And when we moved into Vernon Square, which had been a very dirty and worn and shabby pink left by the School of African and Oceanic Studies, the powers that be decided on these grim, I personally think grim, grey walls as neutral and presumably not needing so much cleaning as some other colours or white walls. But anyway, this is how I began. History has repeated itself. To quote Joshua, framed with seminar rooms of such bareness that the eye and mind revolted, I decided by hook or by crook to find some contemporary art to destroy all the vestiges of such nudity, and by this action to restore to its rightful position art in everyday surroundings. Then I say, for more than the promised couple of years, we're not now slated to go back to Somerset House until 2027, which is optimistic. For more than the promised couple of years, the Courtauld's teaching operations have been relocated to Vernon Square, while refurbishment of the gallery and now the academic quarters take place at Somerset House. The huge and grim building southeast of King's Cross was founded as a primary school in 1916 for 1,500 children, so you're very lucky, with a rooftop playground, now a long corridor of staff offices, because the third floor with all our offices are really those little kind of bin contraptions put on this playground, which is so cruel because it was designed so that with the eye level of the windows so that the students could never see anything outside and only the sky, so they were severely disciplined. This is a Foucauldian institution in terms of its architecture. So repainted mainly in a too tasteful grey, it welcomed the VS1 embodiment exhibition. This is our first iteration of the post-East Wing collection. In the autumn of 2023, in part conceived as a tribute to Joshua, as a reiteration in exile of the East Wing collection. His splendid full-length portrait by Nicola Green now greets visitors in our reception, posters for the hanging picnic or other men's flowers. My father used to have the collection of the wartime anthology, Other Men's Flowers, which is where Joshua got the title from. Grace passageways, while a seminar room hosts framed installation photos of Joshua's first historic East Wing collection, together with his life mask. Many students might have been in that seminar room and not quite understood what they were looking at. The luckiest now have seminars in the shocking pink Seminar Room 9, with its windowsill large pink neoclassical butt plug by Louise Benton. A naked man performed in chains for the opening night, Alex Free of Linked. Students are intrigued by mysterious wall statements. Joshua was a very bright and profoundly irritating presence in the London art world. That's Adrian Searle for The Guardian in 2001. Our centenary beckons in 2032, where Joshua will figure in our memories, his legacy again refreshed for new generations. The obituary piece I wrote for Joshua in 1996 is as vivid for me forever. And of course, for me, he's always going to be that young guy in the reception room. He's not going to grow old, whereas like certain precursors in some ways, I'm thinking of Marilyn Monroe, for example, we can't, or Lady Di, with whom he was a contemporary, you can't really think of them as, older people, can you? So Joshua is always this very radiant presence.
I think it would rather be known as sort of a Rambo character than Lady Di, but...
Yes.
The analogy stands, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So look, it's coming up to 7 o'clock, but I'm sure there are one or two more things. As I said, I can't do an academic. I'm going to ask you to reply to the lecture. But, I mean, let's just, I'm sorry, it's rather schoolmarmy though, but I know that you two, but how many people here actually did encounter Joshua and knew him? I'm sure there must be, yeah. So wouldn't you like to say just some little tiny thing about some funny memory?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, you knew him.
Yeah. Josh and I met at art
Hold
school.
on for the microphone.
Sorry. I've got a terrible memory, so it's a bit difficult, but Josh and I met at art school, so we were at Campbell Art together, and he always had fantastic ideas about things to do. The artwork of his I most remember that he did at art school was a huge black painting covered in oil and also bird skeletons, which I think Darren probably remembers. Darren, it was so that's the first artwork I remember him doing. When he set up the gallery in Charlotte Street, I donated my Macintosh, I think, my old Macintosh to Josh. He used to use.
Do you mean one of these or one of these?
One of the old computers.
Yeah.
Oh, right, that's what I thought you meant.
Yes, the sort of the kind of I guess it was the it must have been the late 80s one, and we were going to set up an art magazine together as usual, with trying to do things. We were horribly impeded by a lack of cash, but it didn't mean that we were able to get the I think it was called the enterprise allowance in those days, which was a very good thing for Josh, because he was sort of trying to do all of this incredible artwork and everything he produced, and sort of half the time it's probably on enterprise allowance. He slept in the gallery, he had a bed in the gallery room, it was just always a fantastically charismatic, brilliant person. What can I say? He was.
Did the magazine ever? Was there even one number of it or not?
We had some different ideas. I was sort of saying, let's do a sort of listings mag, get local businesses to sponsor us. And Josh was like, we're going to print it on vellum and it will have original artworks in it. And I think that's why we sort of reached a point in the way because we just couldn't work out how to actually produce this beautiful thing that Joshua wanted, which if it had ever existed would be, I'm sure, a collector's, treasure nowadays. But he was an amazing guy.
But that's so lovely because you work really closely together as contemporaries. That's really lovely.
Well, he did try and save the local print industry because the letterpress thing was dying off then, and he met Tom Shaw, and Tom's mother ended up running the Museum of Typography, and in those days, no one wanted this stuff, so they'd literally go into the London College of Printing. If you could get the presses out, you could take them. And Josh was still using these people who were still pulling stuff by hand, literally by Spittlefield's marking. Imagine how much the building's worth now. So he was trying to get artists to work with local tradesmen to keep them still going,
Tom had a huge letterpress place up on by Fashion Street.
Yeah.
And I remember Josh gave me a tour. He was taking me tours of places, to the original Colony Room as well, and places like that. But Tom had a massive letterpress sort of factory on the second floor of this big building by Fashion Street, I remember. And I assume that he must have printed a lot of Josh's original posters and artworks.
Yeah, and he did stuff for Howard Hodgkin, all sorts of people who's printing stuff.
Oh, he was actually assisting well-known artists in a different way.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that. That's great. And you had a memory you'd like to share.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Your hands up.
I've got millions.
Here we are. Here's the
I've got millions of memories.
millions. Good. That's
No,
what we
you're
want
not
to
having
hear.
all of them.
So please, could you introduce yourself first as
Yeah,
well?
I'm Zebedee Held.
Oh, you are Zebedee.
I am, yeah.
Wonderful.
You didn't get
Yes,
my
I'm
email,
so
though.
pleased.
Yeah. We're only invited me this afternoon. So I've got a heck of a lot of memories of Josh. So I met him like Tabitha at Camberwell, and we became incredibly close friends very quickly. And I think my favourite memories of Josh are around that era before he went to Charlotte Road. And he lived at Strand-on-the-Green in Chiswick, and he had a little boat. And we used to get into his boat, and he had a little engine for it, and head off into central London of an evening, and go and have the most incredible evenings in town. Get back to the boat about 5 o'clock in the morning, completely pie-eyed, and then just chug back to Chiswick in the boat. Obviously no police, nothing. And at the weekends we'd take the boat out and find derelict warehouses and break into them and try and risk our lives as much as possible. And then I remember vividly one Christmas Eve when he rang me up, and he lived in Chiswick and I lived in Putney. And he said, what are you doing tonight? Got any plans? And I was like, yes, I come from quite a musical family. I'm like, yes, all the family's coming over and we're singing Christmas carols and everyone's bringing an instrument and and that sort of thing. He's like, oh, brilliant, great. What time does it start? I'll be there. I was like, Josh, you don't have an instrument? Yeah, I'll find something. And so he turned up with a human skull, which he'd dug out of the grave himself in El Salvador, and the femur that matched it. And he said, I'm on percussion. And my extremely posh aunt was very, very frightened. But now she tells the story herself. So it was such fun.
Did he play it well? Did he play it well, adequately?
Yeah, brilliantly. And he sort of wailed in Spanish, which...
But Zebby, you've forgotten the story of how you managed to stop the Oxford-Cambridge boat race with Joshua decided to get on the boat and he lost the outboard motor.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, we went. Yeah, so every year we used to go and watch the boat race, and on this little boat, and we'd sort of moor it by the pub in Barnes near where I think the finish line was, and obviously we'd have quite a few beers to drink earlier in the day, and our mooring came loose, and our boat with the three of us on it sort of went out into midstream just as the Oxford and Cambridge crews were turning the bend, or whatever it's called, and we were pounced upon by the police boat, and they tried to sort of drag us back into shore, at which point the engine fell off the back of the boat and went to the bottom of the Thames. So they parked us on the side of the river, and luckily the race managed to continue, but we weren't really watching at that stage. And then Josh was desperate to get the engine back, and the police were like, no, just wait until low tide, But he wasn't having any of it, so he dived into the Thames. And then everyone on the banks, of which there were thousands of people, all they were watching was us in the water with the police and Josh leaping in, and the boat race was being completely ignored. And then Josh landed on a huge shard of glass, sliced his foot almost clean off. So the police pulled him out, and then they took him off to hospital. And then me and my friend Dave were left in the boat.
But did you find the engine?
Yeah. Josh sort of reappeared about 10 hours later, and then we were in charge of waiting for the tide to go down and reuniting the boat with its engine.
That's a wonderful story.
But,
It's got its like hair-raising moment, which is not surprising, is it?
Yeah.
Shall we ask just for one more hair-raising moment before we repair to alcoholic refreshment, which in true Joshua Compston tradition. This gentleman, lovely.
Hi there, thanks for organising this evening. Darren, it's very good to see you, it's been a long time. I didn't know Josh personally. I was born the year that Frieze opened, for context. But I did, I'm here, a few of us here tonight helped organise the 9th Eastering exhibition.
Oh, brilliant.
Which opened, would have been 2009, 2010. And, it was fascinating, Sarah, hearing you say, I was late tonight, so I just breezed through reception. But to hear that the Nicola Green portrait of Joshua's downstairs and some other pieces he worked on, the exhibition has always had a really uneasy relationship with the institution, right? Like Joshua was a pain in the arse to all these people in 1990, 1991 when he put on the loan collection. And something that's worth saying is I think a lot of the tutors, based on the conversations I've had with Darren and just a few archival materials that are available, were really frustrated that they felt he went over their heads to go to these great art world luminaries to get financial backing and support, get loans organised for the exhibition. So there was that very uneasy relationship with this 20, 21-year-old guy is sort of circumventing the institution. I don't know, I'm curious, I don't know what the nature of that relationship is now with the current exhibition that may be forming. But for us, I look back on it and we really were given carte blanche to do anything. We're just a bunch of 20-year-old kids putting this entire show on by ourselves.
So we've all changed, although you haven't grown a white beard, I'm terribly pleased about that. But was I involved or not? Was it Julian Stellabros was involved?
No, we didn't. We had we had advice from the staff, but really we were on our own. And this was also in the wake of the economic recession, so fundraising was extremely difficult. But also in terms of institutional relationship, it was really just every so often we'd be marched into Deborah Swallow's office to kind of, just so she could confirm we weren't doing anything totally crazy.
Well, it was funny because you also depended on the goodwill of people in the galleries sometimes for help with things like hanging.
Absolutely.
As I said, I was involved at the beginning because I was Joshua's tutor and so forth, but then I was always the interface person. But when Julian Stellabros was appointed, because his big thing was British art and YBAs, I thought I should gracefully retreat And then things became a little bit more peculiar, but then because I had some memories, I was involved this year, not in any hands-on way, in this actual hang, and not in the hang at all, but in talking about Joshua and directing people to our archives, which were in funny dispersed places. And one of the things that's very difficult is every year when students leave, you say, you are going to do this, that, or the other. We'll try and publish your thesis. They all say yes, yes, yes. And they immediately go off and fall in love with somebody or go to South America or go to China or whatever. And that's that. And so the continuity was always a problem. But to be very frank, until I read the proofs of this book, I did not realise, and we've talked extensively about that there's 65 archival boxes of Joshua's papers in Tate Britain Archive. So we were able to bring together this time and put together lots of things. And I think that our happiness at making this a little more vibrant place and having art on the wall, although obviously this time round, with all congratulations to the VS1 first team, it couldn't be as ambitious as Joshua, including scale because of this building. They did a great work, and I'd just like to tell you all, I'm obviously going to direct you shortly, just down the road, just down a corridor to the wine, quote unquote, I hate that term, wine reception, in the research forum. But past that, if you go down to the end and turn the corner, you'll see the little Joshua tribute at the end of this floor in that direction. And then I shouldn't think you'll want to, but were you to wish to go upstairs, you'll see that when you come out of the lift, there's lots more. And because of the bizarreness of this building, I've forgotten the seminar room with the other stuff in it, with the death mask and things, because it's such a weird place. It's because each floor is like it's exactly like the other floor. But as I said, he is all over the place, and I think now the relationship is more relaxed, although there's still that need for help. And I think the accumulative success, but especially the way that Joshua's presence is now more visible as a presence rather than just the guy who started it, and this is the X iteration of it. I think the visibility of his presence this time will help oil the wheels for the next X many years. And as I say, the 2032 one's got to be the absolute bumper centenary.
That's what I found fascinating about the last generation of students. They literally came and tracked me down. They'd read about Joshua and they were absolutely invigorated by it.
Exactly.
It wasn't I had to find them. They really wanted all this stuff on show. And I think there's more of a presence now in Joshua in this building than there ever has been.
Well,
Previously
curiously
in the
enough,
Courtauld,
yes. Curiously enough,
it's
yes.
visible, yeah.
Yeah, and his portrait wasn't hung in such a beautiful.
But it's what the students wanted. So
exactly.
that was their generation wanted
Good
that.
old students, and I think they find all the quotes. I think they find. Are there any students from this generation or from this VS1 who could just say one or two words? I was told that some VS1 people would be here.
I actually am.
Fantastic.
Hi, I'm Romy. I'm the director of the upcoming.
Oh, you're the one. Yes,
yeah, which is really exciting. And actually, we have Will and Marina in here, and Madeleine as well is in the drinks reception. So we are the exec team going forward, which is great. It's been incredibly interesting to listen to you guys talk about Joshua on a more personal level, and I think you're absolutely right that his influence on the last exhibition, VS1, was so strong. And I know that much of their theme was built around him as a character and what they could find through archival materials. And I also just want to mention that for those of you in the room who did know Joshua personally or who have connections with the biennial, have worked on it, we are putting forward a call for any material you have, memories, footage, anything you can find, because we really want to carry on Joshua's legacy and bring that to the forefront in our exhibition as well. So
that's great to know. Well, I think that's such a lovely way to end, to think about this continuity. Were you going to say anything else?
No, I was just looking at the picture.
Yeah.
They're so lovely, aren't they?
There's a picture on there of Joshua in his first ever spot painting he bought from Damien, and Josh was the first person to buy it in his bedroom.
I
And he's wearing a
know.
spotty shirt
Yeah.
and a fag. and he paid 700 quid for it. When he got it home, it was wonky. And I've been working class, I said, take it back to him, get it stretched. And when he phoned up Jay Joplin, Jay said, Damien likes it that way. I said, they're taking the piss out of you.
Darren, where's it now? I could really do with that.
It's in Germany. It was sold to his friend, the German art dealer, for the gallery, went you?
Yeah.
Well, they're super fun, and he was super stylish. He was a very, very stylish and excellent student, and I appreciated him very much.
Thank you.
So I think that we are all going to celebrate the publication of the book with a round of applause for our two